Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and this is my review of the third episode of season 5 of Star Trek Discovery. And this whole season seems to be one long quest to find this season's mystery box, which is the Progenitor technology, which was hidden by those scientists who found it in the time of TNG. And because of the Dominion War, they were afraid people were going to use it for bad things. And so they hid clues to it so that sometime in the future, people who are worthy of it will be able to find it. And now the Discovery is desperately looking for it, so why exactly is it so important to find it? Didn't the Federation already had the Genesis device, so why is it so important to find this ancient technology? And I guess it's a race against the clock because those other two bad guys, Shinhoti and Scroll, are looking for it as well, and so that's why they have to find it first. But I keep thinking, why cannot they simply pay these guys to recruit them to be on their side? Like, all they seem to want is money because, in the previous episode, after they found that first mystery box, they gave it to the android to try to sell it to him, but only because he didn't pay them enough. That's why they killed him. So they seem to simply want to sell it to someone for money. So why doesn't the Federation simply pay them with dilithium or something so that they will give them all their clues and stop interfering, or even to recruit them, to help them? And so why are they the adversaries? If all they want is money, then simply pay them with some dilithium. Since the Federation is supposedly controlling the only supply in the galaxy of dilithium, so it should be the richest power in the galaxy and all of that. So these two villains are a constant interference, and they are kind of weak villains as well. They do keep mentioning the Breen as some big galactic threat, so maybe later on in the season the Breen will become the main villain who will try to steal that technology for themselves or whatever. Maybe they'll finally show us what the Breen look like, and I'm guessing Book will convince Shin Hoti to be on their side in the end, since he was a friend of her father or something, so she's his only family, he says, or something like that. So pretty sure she will convert to their side in the very end. So for now, they're simply like a minor interference. And they're the only reason they're on the clock and in such a hurry to find the next clue before they do, because they couldn't simply pay them off. It's also interesting how they said because they are the ones who found the Romulan ship first, they have a claim to it and the Federation doesn't. But how come Michael didn't reply to them that the Romulans are actually part of the Federation now? Since remember, they became one with the Vulcans, they joined the Vulcans and then joined the Federation. So technically, it's Federation property, since Romulans are now part of the Federation. So anyway, in this episode, they go to the Trill planet and they find out that the markings on that artifact is the same as Trill skin marks, and they match those specific patterns to a Trill who lived 800 years ago. So they want to speak with the new host of that same Trill scientist whose markings match the ones on the artifact. But then Guardian Z appears in a hologram and he does not want to let them on the planet unless they answer some riddle. Isn't Trill a Federation member by this point? Didn't they say in the previous seasons that it is rejoining the Federation? So how can it not allow a Starfleet ship to visit it? Is a little bit strange. So Guardian Z, which is a really silly name, says he will only allow them to go to the planet if they answer some riddle, and then Michael immediately answers it in 10 seconds, and then he does allow them to go down. So what was the point of this scene? A lot of the show is kind of filler, it's kind of style over substance. Oh, it's just some mysterious riddle, or we're going to have some beautiful scenes of some caves on the planet, and there is very little substance, very little actual story. And probably the most disappointing thing this whole episode is that they almost didn't do anything with Adira. And as I said in the previous review, Adira was maybe the biggest disappointment in the last several seasons, because when they first introduced that character, I thought she's going to be very interesting because it's once again a Trill with the memories and experiences of numerous past lifetimes. So I thought she's going to be an awesome character. Instead, they did like a reverse character development on her, because it's really ridiculous that when she first showed up on Discovery back in the third episode of season 3, she didn't even have the memories of the Trill yet, at least not in a conscious way, maybe subconsciously, since they did say she's really smart and knows many languages and stuff like that, so maybe subconsciously she had some of those memories and experiences, but she was behaving very confidently. She was part of Earth's defense force, and she was bossing people around, so she was very confident. Later on, in episode 4 of season 3, she went to the Trill planet where she connected with all her previous hosts and regained all their memories and life experiences. And somehow after that, she became less confident and more shy and more scared and not knowing how to deal with people and stuff like that. So it makes absolutely zero sense. It's the opposite of what should have happened, because, even in Deep Space Nine, there was an episode when Lionel Luthor came to the station because he wanted to steal the Dax symbiote for himself because he used to be a candidate and wasn't accepted. And in the beginning of that episode, they showed how shy and timid he is. But after he stole the symbiote and put it in himself, suddenly he became super confident and sure of himself since he had the experiences of numerous previous lifetimes. And so shouldn't the same thing have happened with Adira? And somehow in the show they did the complete opposite. Somehow she became shy and scared and a nervous wreck after that, instead of it being the other way around. So it's completely ridiculous. So I thought maybe in this episode they're finally going to explain maybe something went wrong with her connection with the personalities of the previous host, maybe because she's a human, so the connection is not complete or something, so maybe they will fix it in this episode. But they did absolutely none of that. Instead, the only thing they did with her is have her meet with Gray, who is now a guardian of the symbiotes, and they're now breaking up. Which is also ridiculous, since they were literal soulmates in the beginning of their story when they showed how much they loved each other. And because Gray died, Adira took the symbiote to herself, and then they became literally bonded in the spirit. Like later on, she sees Gray together with the other previous hosts, and so she will be with her forever as part of herself. And so it was kind of a bittersweet ending of that story. It should have really ended there. I think it would have been a perfect little episode. I actually think that was the best episode of the whole show, because for the first time it actually made me feel something in the show. So they had that love story and a tragedy because Gray died, and yet Adira took the symbiote, and so Gray became part of her. So even though she's dead, she lives on with her. They're now in the same body. So it's something which is both sad and happy at the same time. So it was kind of emotional, and it really should have ended there. Instead, Adira kept seeing Gray as an imaginary friend that only she can see. Later on, they made Gray a hologram. Later on, they put her or him, or I don't know what that is, into a synthetic body which had a lot of skin problems for some reason. And then Gray became her own strong, independent person, and then decided to leave Adira to go study to become a guardian of the symbiotes. And they say now they've been in a long distance relationship, talking through holograms, and now they finally meet each other. And then Gray says, let's break up, and Adira is like, okay. And I'm like, wait a second, weren't you literal soulmates? And the whole conversation, the whole dialogue seems as if Gray is extremely manipulative and uncaring. Like, if you think about the whole storyline, it all started with Gray being the host of the symbiote, then giving the symbiote to Adira, then getting out of this relationship, becoming an independent person without the symbiote, without all the troubles of the other host memories, and just going away, being free, and leaving Adira to deal with all this crap. So this is extremely convoluted and bizarre the way they did this whole storyline. And Adira is all like, okay, that's fine, not mentioning any of the stuff that I just mentioned. So it's really terrible. It really should have ended with that nice ending of them being together in the same body because it's a Trill. And that would also make sense why Adira wants to be called them and they and all of that, since it's not about sexuality, it's simply about the fact that it's like multiple personalities in one body, and then it will make sense. They could have even used it as some kind of allegory to all these issues and all of that. Instead, they just said, oh, I always was not a man, not a woman, that's why I want to be called they, them, not because I'm a Trill. And so why not do something a little bit more interesting with that whole Trill idea? And so they did absolutely nothing with that. So I think Adira is the biggest disappointment in this whole show, because it had potential to be such a good character, and they completely missed it, and they did the opposite of what should have been done. Suddenly Adira became more shy, less confident, not knowing how to deal with other people, and just a total wreck. And speaking of annoying characters, in all the scenes on the ship, they show us Jim Raynor, who's now the first officer of the Discovery. And before Michael left to Trill, she gave him the command to bond with the rest of the crew, to get to know the crew. And so he doesn't want to do that. He instead tries to find Shin Hoti and Skrull. But then Tilly comes and forces him to do what Michael commanded him. And then he agrees to allow every crew member 20 seconds to get to know them. And so they each come in, and he only gives them 20 words to say and then kicks them out. So they show him to be this total a-hole, and in some ways I kind of start to like him after that, because I don't know why, but in all the new Star Trek shows they always have this kind of character who is always a white straight man, and they try to make him an entire a-hole, but then he actually becomes kind of likable. Maybe because it's simply more interesting and more entertaining, or maybe it's a little bit more realistic that the character is not perfect and has flaws and all of that. So characters like Captain Shaw in season 3 of Picard and Captain Lorca in season 1 of Discovery, but they were all kind of fun, and usually they kill off these kinds of characters, and so I suspect they might kill off this one as well. I kind of hope not, because I'm actually starting to like this guy, because it's kind of entertaining at least, and so I'm not sure if that's the intent, to simply be entertaining, or if they're trying to have some kind of message about, Michael will now have to educate him to be a proper human being, even though he's an alien with some strange ears. I think that's a species we once saw in Deep Space Nine, by the way. And we have another subplot with Saru being in love with that president of Vulcan, or Nivar, the way they call it now. And they want to get married, but she has an assistant Vulcan who is a straight white Vulcan, so obviously he's an a-hole as well. And he tells Saru that he shouldn't marry the president because that will damage her political career, because the purists on Vulcan will dislike the fact that she's marrying some alien guy, even though it's the 32nd century. So shouldn't they be past that kind of thing? But apparently there are still a bunch of racists on Vulcan, and so this guy says Saru at least to postpone the announcement of their wedding, and then Saru goes to talk with her about it, and then she gets annoyed at him and says, but I'm a strong, independent woman, how dare you tell me I should be worried about my political career, I'm strong enough that I can handle it on my own, and all of that, and got that kind of speech, and then she leaves, and then later Saru apologizes to her for doubting her being a strong woman and all of that. There was also a scene of a diplomatic meeting of some other aliens in the Federation, apparently, and one of them seems as if he's from that planet, from that terrible racist episode of TNG called Code of Honor. They don't directly say it, but the way he's dressed kind of makes me suspect he might be from that planet. We also see one of those snake aliens that was also from early TNG, and so I'm guessing these are all deliberate homages to those old aliens from TNG. Maybe that woman leader who sits there is from Angel 1. They don't actually say any of the names of these planets. I'm just saying they seem kind of similar to me. Maybe it's a coincidence. So anyway, the president votes the same way as Saru does, and that makes that other Vulcan guy worried that people will think she's voting because of what Saru votes. And so we have all this political and personal soap drama stuff. Not really that interesting in my opinion. And on the Trill planet, they go to those symbiote caves again, and they meet some crazy old lady, and she's the host of an 800-year-old symbiote, who is the same one who was one of those scientists who hid all those clues leading to the Progenitor tech. And the old lady cannot simply tell them the information they want. Instead, she has to transfer the essence of that original host to someone else so that he can lead them to the next clue. So they do that ritual that we did see in Deep Space Nine once, and so at least it's canonically correct, and so they transfer the soul of that original host to the body of Dr. Colbert to take them to the next clue. And they asked, cannot we simply beam there? And he says, no, we have to take the physical walk there for some reason. And then they walk in some desert. And I kept thinking, how come in 800 years the surroundings haven't changed? Like they hid something in some desert near those symbiote caves. It has to be near it since they physically walk on foot there. And so that means it has to be pretty close by. So how did they know in the past that it's not all going to become some huge city or something? How did they know it's going to remain a desert? And it seems to be a really dangerous desert, so that's how they knew no one will go walking there. And it's all part of some test to see that only the worthy people are going to get the next clue, since they don't want bad people to get it. And he leads them to some canyons and then tells them, he's the one to tell them there are some vicious dangerous creatures there. They have to be careful. Since these creatures eat other creatures, they even find some dead carcass of some other animal. And so he's the one to say to them, be very careful, there are some really dangerous animals here. And when they actually see those creatures, they look like the arachnids from Starship Troopers. They can fly with wings, and they have like spider legs, and they also have the ability to cloak themselves, kind of like the beast of Tanagra from the episode Darmok. So they seem to be extremely dangerous creatures, and they shoot some kind of strange darts at them, which seems really lethal. And then Dr. Colbert, who is inhabited by the Trill called Jinaal, that's also the title of the episode, he just runs away. He tells them, oh, we cannot get the clue that way, and he runs away, telling them the clue is in some rock in the middle of the nest of those creatures, and it has those symbols of that same puzzle that they have on the ship. And he tells them that and then runs away. And then they're trying to get to that clue, but these creatures keep attacking them, and they try to use the transporters to get to it, and almost getting killed every second. Like, they keep missing them with their huge darts that they shoot at them, and they're unable to get the clue, and then they go and hide in some crack in the mountain. And then Michael sees that those creatures are actually just protecting their eggs, and then she thinks maybe they're not so evil after all, and then she goes out there, removes her phaser, and then walks toward the creatures without any phasers. How does she know they are intelligent and will understand any of this? And so that was hilarious. So at least the episode did try to make it, like in the old Star Trek episodes about morality, how not every creature is evil, and maybe that creature is just protecting its young, and all of that is fine, but the way they do it here is kind of stupid, since how does she know these creatures are intelligent and they will understand that she removed the phaser and is no longer a threat? How does she know they will not attack and kill her? And it turns out it was all a test by Jinaal, who wanted to see if they will actually harm these creatures or if they will try to connect with them, and that was the real test, which they passed because they became nice to the creatures suddenly, because they suddenly spotted their eggs there, which were hard to notice even. And again, he's the one who told them these are vicious, dangerous creatures, and then he expects them not to defend themselves and not to shoot at them and to have empathy toward them, and then they come back to meet him, and then he gives them the real clue, which he pulls out of some rock in some other place. So it's all kind of ridiculous, because he literally almost got them killed and was betting on them not being too violent against the creatures, and if they would have been, then he wouldn't have given them the clue, I guess, since, getting the Progenitor's tech has the potential to do a lot of harm in the galaxy, and so he had to make sure only righteous people will get it or something. So again, the idea of it is fine, but the execution, the way they did it, is kind of stupid, and so that kind of ruins all of it. And also Michael in this whole season has been kind of over preachy, over enlightened, like in the previous episode when they were in those graveyards of those ancient aliens, and she says we have to be super careful not to harm anything on that planet since it's a sacred ground for those aliens who no longer exist, who went extinct, so who cares? But she was like, no, we have to protect that sacred ground. And later in the episode, she sent those dot droids to fix any damage they caused on that planet because it's holy ground for that culture. And so in this whole season, she's constantly kind of preaching to people kind of too much. And Star Trek did do that kind of thing before, but they did it with logic. They did it in good measure, in a way that makes sense. And here it's all kind of over-exaggerated in a way that doesn't make sense. And that's why it's kind of annoying. It's kind of in your face too much. And the same thing here when she goes to those aliens without any phasers to prove to them that she's not a threat to them and to apologize to them without even knowing if they're intelligent and would get it or not. So anyway, after they pass this stupid test, then he gives them the next clue, which gives them the location, which is somewhere inside Zenkethi space. But the way Michael says that name sounds a little bit off. It sounds as if she said Zingeti, so that was kind of strange. And then when she talks with Colbert on the ship, he says how amazing it was to have another man inside of him. And I'm thinking, wait, aren't you used to that kind of thing by now? And then they talk about the philosophical ramifications of finding the Progenitor's tech, since they're the ones who created all life and all of that. And I don't like how in this whole season they keep talking about the Progenitors as if there are some literal gods, as if they designed all of life, and as if they created it all in one day and stuff like that. And in the actual episode of TNG, in the actual dialogue of that Progenitor, she sounds very different. So I'm going to wait and see what they actually do with them in the end of the season before I judge it, but I already don't like the way they kind of over-exaggerate everything. I'm not saying it's not amazing to seed humanoid DNA life in all the planets in the galaxy and all of that. It is pretty amazing, but the way they make it sound, it's like they had the Genesis device. Like they are the ones who created everything and all of that. So I don't like the way they over-exaggerate things. And probably in the end of the season they'll have something like the Dakara device in Stargate. Some kind of device that can instantaneously seed all the planets in the galaxy with something. That they will probably do something over-exaggerated like that. Maybe they'll even use the Spore network. Maybe they'll say they actually seeded all the planets using the mycelium network. Something like that will probably be done in the very end of the season to tie things together with the Spore network and all of that. So probably they will do something stupid like that, which again doesn't really fit the dialogue of the original episode in TNG. And also, since they're going with this whole progenitor story in this whole season, why are they constantly showing us all these exotic aliens which do not look anything human, like the snakehead alien? Maybe this should have been the season that shows more humanoid aliens, since it all ties with this plot line of how come so many aliens in the galaxy look so human. So why is in this season they constantly show us so many exotic aliens, which I guess their planets were not seeded by those progenitors, since they did not evolve to look like humans, and so that's also kind of funny. And we also see a Ferengi, which again looks not like the Ferengis that we used to know. It looks like their own version of the Ferengi, but at least they had the detail of showing the Ferengi bartender pouring some snail juice, which Tilly later drinks with joy, which was kind of funny. And we see that it's called Slug O Cola. So that bit did kind of make me laugh, so I do kind of like it, and it is kind of a good attention to detail, since snail juice was mentioned a lot of times in Deep Space Nine. It was especially funny when Quark demanded to get some hand-squeezed snail juice. That was always funny to me, and the way that Tilly drinks it without any problems is also kind of funny. And there was a good scene when Tilly actually berates this captain, saying how horrible he is, and then he proves to her that he actually does care about the crew, that he does know by heart all their files and everything about them and all of that, so it's not as if he's that big of an a-hole as she thought and all of that. So there were a few good moments in this episode, so I'm not going to say it was all terrible. And before they left the Trill planet, Michael warned the Trill that some bad guys might be coming there as well, and then Guardian Z told her not to worry since Trill security can handle any threat and all of that, and shortly after we see that Shin-Hoti actually impersonated one of the Guardians and no one noticed. So that was also kind of hilarious, the way Guardian Z was so confident and sure his security forces can handle anything, and then we see that under his own nose one of the Guardians is actually Shin-Hoti in disguise, and then they had some kind of ritual in which they all hug each other, and then she hugs Adira and apparently leaves some kind of small homing beacon on her arm, which then cloaks itself. And so that's how they will be able to follow the Discovery to the next clue. So it makes the Trill security look like a joke. I mean, Shin-Hoti didn't even disguise her face, she was just wearing a hoodie, and that's it. She wasn't wearing a holographic mask or something, so why didn't they show them photos of the two bad guys that are supposedly about to come there? Why didn't they bother to give more information to the Trill security to look for those individuals? And so at least they should have showed she has some holographic face on or something, because she came to hug Adira, and Adira didn't even notice that, just because she was wearing a hoodie. So this is like Emperor Palpatine kind of disguise. Just because he wears a hoodie, no one will recognize him as Sidious. So that's it for this episode. It didn't annoy me as much as Discovery usually does, but it did have those same kind of stupid things. And that's my biggest disappointment with Discovery, is that a lot of things just don't really make sense if you actually think about them. So that's my opinion. Let me know what you think and we can discuss it in the comments below. And I will see you all next time. Bye bye.